asleep in the lab. I woke up on a slab, so I went and did a dab. Waking big on my ass. All I want is cash.
The meta of tomorrow at Ignister. What's going on, guys? Pegasus from the Wise Guys. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. Make sure you sub. Make sure you hit the bell. This deck is something for a little while that has been out. It's been known, but the deck hasn't been that great. It was really like tier 4, tier 5, really. But now we're in a different era where this deck is about to skyrocket like Dogecoin for all we care. Bottom line, you're not going to understand what I'm talking about until I show you evidence of why this deck is a potential meta deck of tomorrow. And I promise you, it is at least going to be tier 1. Let's look into it, shall we? Let's go.
So guys, before we touch on all of the newer cards, we first have to set up talking about some of the older cards, because this archetype has already been known. It's already been out there in the fray, and it just wasn't cutting it. It wasn't up to speed, and we'll get into why a little bit later on. But as far as the known reasons why the deck is already somewhat known, it's because it has a really high attack value. As far as some of the old cards that you already know about, first up we got to talk about Achichi at Ignister. And Achichi at Ignister is a level 2 fire cyberse effect monster that reads, if this card is normal or special summon, you can add one level 4 or lower at Ignister monster from your deck to your hand. So really it's the Stratos of the deck, and it allows you to be able to search any of the other ones. And it's really the focal point as far as the main deck monsters on being able to get into some of the other monsters, because, well, if you open one and you might not open another, then you can search the other with this card. Baruru at Ignister is the level 3 wind cyberse tuner effect monster that also reads, if this card is normal or special summon, you can send one at Ignister monster from your deck to the graveyard. So already you have a Stratos, and already you have a Foolish Burial. It also has effect, if this card is sent to the graveyard as a material for a synchro summon of a cyberse, you can target a monster and then kick it back onto the field. As far as Doyan at Ignister, the level 4 dark, it has the ability to target one monster, AI Ignister at Ignister monster in your graveyard, and add it to your hand. It also has other effects that we'll get into a little bit later on. And it's finally Pakari at Ignister, as far as the main deck monsters that are actually important. There's plenty of monsters within this archetype. There's plenty of spells and traps within this archetype, but a lot of them just aren't important. This one adds a spell or trap, and that's pretty much all you need to know, with AI in its name, of course. As far as some of the other cards, important spells and traps are really important to this deck, but there's also a lot of unimportant ones. The focal point of the deck is Ignister AI Land. I always feel like I'm looking at Fire King Island, and really it almost looks identical to me sometimes. But the focal point of the deck basically revolves around spamming onto the field, because you don't have monsters in your main monster zones, which is really easy to do, especially with the new Link 1. AI Auto Reborn is the quick play reborn spell that you can use both on your turn and your opponent's turn, based off of some of the other monster effects in the main deck that can help you to kick the card back in your hand. And the game changer that is When AI First Met You is really the double helix for this deck, and I mean that with every fiber of my being. As far as some of the other cyber stuff, you have to really research it for yourself. A lot of the cyber stuff that's already known, such as the Salomon Great stuff, you guys already know about all of this stuff, but there's a lot that you don't know. You may not know about Balancer Lord. You may not know about some of the other decks that have fallen short, but you may know about a card like Parallel Exceed. Parallel Exceed will probably slide right into this deck rather easily, but it didn't slide into decks for obvious reasons. In a deck like Marincess, which is another Cyberse deck that really didn't make it up to par, so to speak. Long story short, with a lot of these cards, you really have to focus primarily, first and foremost, on When AI First Met You. And with that, let's get into this combo so you can understand what in the world I'm talking about. So on the combos, guys, we really have to start with When AI First Met You and the sheer power level within this card. This card allows you to reveal a Cyberse monster with 2300 attack in your hand or extra deck. Usually you're going to reveal the one in your extra deck. And the Decode Talker Heat Soul that's coming out, as well as the Phoenix card that's actually in the archetype, which I'll show a little bit later, will help you to set up the combo. So first off, you normal summon the Achichi, and then you go directly into the Dark Infant after you've already added Pakari. Dark Infant is going to allow you to add Ignister AI Land, which is exactly what the new Dark Infant card does, which really unlocks the entire deck. Then from there, you special summon the Picari out so that you can add an AI Idol Reborn or any other spell or trap that you may not have in your hand. And then with Cyberse Wicked, being able to special summon off of that quick play and then put it directly under Wicked, you can banish a Cyberse monster in your grave and then add a tuner from your deck to your hand, which is Baruru. Baruru is going to allow you to Foolish Burial the Doyon, and then Splash Mage is going to allow you to special summon it back onto the field. With those two, you can make the Wind Pegasus, and then from there, you get to spam back the Doyon onto the field, and then with those, you get to create Dark Templar. Dark Templar is the one that when you spam something into the zone that it points to, you then are allowed to spam 3 monsters, all the zones that it points to, onto the field. As far as the Dark Infant can move itself actually over to be able to set out further plays on your turn and your next turn because you have another zone for the Heat Soul to point to. Now let's talk about Dark Infant. So guys, Dark Infant is a Link 1 Dark Cyberse Link Effect monster that's coming out in Lightning Overdrive. And the first effect says if this card is Link Summoned, you can add 1 Ignister AI land from your deck to your hand. I already said that. And then the second effect says when a Cyberse monster with 2300 attack, 23 is a daily thing, quick effect, you can move this card to your main monster zone it points to and then change this card's attribute to any attribute until the end of this turn. So basically, with this card, you basically have a way to unlock the zones of Templar, which is definitely going to help trigger some things, but it also puts Ignister AI land inside of your hand. And the problem with the deck before is that if you didn't have the field spell, you were screwed, it was over, and there was nothing you could do because you need to spam and then spam again and then spam again and then spam again and then spam again. That's what the deck does. The deck is designed around swarming. Therefore, if you took away the ability for it to swarm, it couldn't actually do anything. I mean, that's just kind of common sense. If a deck revolves around a field spell and you can't actually get to it because of, well, the state of the game, then it pretty much is what it is. As far as the extra deck monsters, Dark Templar at Ignister is the most powerful, at least in my opinion, extra deck monster inside of this archetype because of what it really sets up. There are more powerful cards, but obviously this card says if a monster is special summoned to a zone this card points to, even during the damage step, you can special summon as many level 4 or lower at Ignister monsters from your graveyard as possible to your zones this card points to, but their effects are negated, and when this card destroys an opponent's monster by battle, it does even more craziness. Light Dragon at Ignister is really, really powerful as well, but it also is a generic card, which a lot of people may have never noticed. It only takes 2 level 4 monsters. Its first effect says you can detach 1 material from this card and destroy face-up monsters your opponent controls up to the number of Ad Ignister monsters you control. Really, really powerful if you have control of the game, and you've seen in the replays how quick you can have that control off of 1 card. The second effect is really, really powerful as well, but we don't really need to cover that right now because we can obviously talk about that at a later juncture. Wind Pegasus at Ignister is really, really super strong. Its graveyard effect has been known inside of other decks. It's been generically known as well in some of the other decks. But finally, all of these cards are finally being used in the actual deck they were designed for, but it also has an on-field effect to destroy spell or traps up to the number of cards you control. It's the same kind of theme going along. Arrival at Ignister, really, really powerful, but I don't actually think it's super duper necessary. I actually think Dark Fluid might be a little bit better, but you can obviously use this in the same capacity, but I feel that Dark Fluid may actually work better for you. It's either going to be this, Dark Fluid, or the Update Jammer / package. Now, some of the other stuff, as I said, the Update Jammer stuff, you have to play Ling Karibo. And on top of the Update Jammer, just continuing on to the rest of like the extra deck, I think Splash Mage is an obvious choice. I don't really think there's anything that you can do to not play the card because you have to remember you're locked into Cyberse, so you have to really focus on Cyberse. As far as the rest of the extra deck, yes, people forget that Abramax is the extra deck, and this is in an example deck list. It is in no way solved, and you'll see why in a second, because I actually feel that some of the extra deck is a hell of a lot better in the OCG, and they've actually figured out the perfect strategy, which I'm really excited to talk about. But as far as the extra deck stuff, you can expect to see stuff like Cyberse Quantum Dragon, just because you end on Templar, and the Templar on the field really is something remarkable because of your Gonna Plus. So them being unable to attack over anything else on the field, Because you obviously, if you control a Link monster, you can't really do anything else or target anything else. Pretty decent, and you're going to end with the ability to make a Synchro 7 and have a Wind Pegasus in the graveyard. So, like, before, this deck didn't have a go first play. It didn't really have a way to recur the field spell, or at least push through to the field spell, get to the field spell quicker. It didn't have a lot of consistency, and pretty much all of this support is pretty much fixing that. But as far as the extra deck stuff, I really feel like the focus is going to boil down to streamlining some of the important cards. But definitely you're going to have to play stuff like I said, with Ling Karibo. Heat Soul is going to be an easy staple. I can't wait for the card to come out. It's going to be absolutely ridiculous. But it's really going to revolve around Access Code Talker. In both of these deck lists, they actually cut out a lot of the fluff, so to speak, and really focused on using the cards that they specifically need, which is, it's a tad bit interesting because a few people have took out the Templar altogether, which is a little bit interesting to me, and they focus pretty much on playing Dark Infant in threes, playing the Ling Karibo to be able to play through back row decks, and then using Splash Mage and then the Talker package to be able to keep returning back into an Access Code Talker to then put enough damage onto the board and then wipe your opponent out. And then obviously having stuff like Light Dragon as a utility monster inside of the extra deck. And really the focus over there, I've noticed, is that they're starting to play a lot more traps, at least from what I've noticed. I've also noticed, I feel like Cyber's Weak Kid is guaranteed and necessary. I also feel that Link Spider is necessary just to play through Nibiru. Obviously, you turn the token into the Link Spider, and then from there you can use the monsters in the main monster zone and the field spell to be able to spam the monsters. And, like, you can just walk right through a Nibiru. So if your opponent tries to cut you off as soon as you've summoned 5 times and you still have Adagnister monsters in your hand, then Link Spider, that's the reason why you see Link Spider in general, really. I don't agree with not playing Dark Templar at all, but I completely understand that some of these deck lists, they're just getting straight to the point. So I'm going to wrap up on this last little bit. I try to cover 5 areas, really, that a deck needs for it to be meta. Attack stat is usually what really matters. Defense, versatility, recovery, and consistency. I've done this before, but I feel like this is the most effective way to break down if a deck is effective enough to be a meta deck, because meta literally means most effective tactic available. Some of you may have never heard that. I think on the attack stat, I feel that on a scale of 0 to 100, 100 being the highest, this deck has an OTK potential that's on the level of Cyber Dragon, so I feel it's 100 out of 100. It can put at least 10,000 on the board through a Prosperity. So it can put 20,000 on the board and then cut through Prosperity. I've literally seen it and just messing around, goofing around, and testing. I feel its defense is its weak point. It's the weak point of the deck. It doesn't really have a way to protect itself. It's really all offense. Not great on defense. I mean, that's just like a sports team. You know, sometimes the best offenses, the best teams with the best offense don't really have a great defense. That's this deck. The versatility is another strong point to this deck. I feel it's about a 90. It can do a lot of things. It can go first now. Before, it wasn't really a strong point. It can go second. That's what it's really designed to do. It can push through back row. It can protect itself with a card like Wind Pegasus in the graveyard and other cards in the cyber stuff. You know, you can end on an Avramax sitting on the field. You can end on having hand traps being drawn into by the Heat Soul Decode Talker. I really feel like all of that, it makes for a really, really high versatility stat. So I'd say that's way up there as well. The recovery part of the deck is also another weak point. I feel that recovery, if we're on a scale of 0 to 100, I'd say the recovery is about a 60 or a 70. It's not great. It doesn't really need to recover like that, but it can recover a little bit. You know, a lot of the main deck monsters are pretty much all that boils down to that. And then obviously the consistency is not going to be the highest. However, this spell card, when AI first met you, definitely is raising it. So I'd say it's about an 80. All in all, guys, I do honestly feel that this deck, while it's not going to be on Spiral's level as far as its impact on the new meta game, I do feel like these support cards are very similar to Spiral in that it's instantly one or two cards being supported, one or two cards being thrown into the deck is going to make it rise definitely to a meta level, very similar to Double Helix. So I definitely, at minimum, say this will be a tier 1 deck. This is Greg Farley, aka Pegasus from the Wise Guys, signing out. I appreciate y'all for tuning in. I am out. YG baby. We'll see you next time.